The ruins of New Anchorage smoldered under an alien sky, the last human stronghold on the colony world of Tyrus IV, reduced to broken steel and shattered concrete. The air was thick with acrid smoke, tinged with the ozone stench of burned-out vehicles and scorched flesh. Captain James Jim Walker crouched behind the husk of an overturned transport, scanning the devastated street ahead. His comm unit crackled with static before Sergeant Mark Ramirez's voice cut through. "They're moving in, Cap," Ramirez reported. "2 squads, full battle gear. We won't last another push." Walker exhaled slowly, adjusting the worn grip of his battered M4 carbine. The rifle was a relic against the Galactic Empire's cutting-edge plasma rifles, but it had served him well. He glanced at the men around him, soldiers who had fought for days on dwindling supplies, their faces lined with exhaustion but eyes sharp with defiance. They were all that remained of the 22nd Colonial Defense Battalion, and now they were little more than ghosts haunting the rubble. Lieutenant Tyler Briggs wiped the sweat and grime from his brow, his sharp blue eyes flicking toward Walker. "They've stopped laughing," he murmured. "That's something." Walker followed his gaze. Beyond the shattered buildings, alien troops moved with practiced precision, their sleek, segmented armor reflecting the eerie glow of the Tyrus moon. The Empire's soldiers, Tovari shock troopers, had spent the last week obliterating every human outpost on the planet, crushing resistance with overwhelming force. In the early days, their commanders had broadcast mockery over open channels, sneering at humanity's outdated weaponry and obsolete tactics. But after days of relentless street fighting, those jeering transmissions had gone silent. Still, the arrogance remained. The Tovari believed victory was inevitable. In the grand scheme of the Empire, humanity was little more than a troublesome infestation, one that would be purged before the real wars resumed elsewhere in the galaxy. Private First Class Jack Cole, the youngest of the group, pressed against the remains of a collapsed barricade, breathing hard. "We're dead if we stay here," he muttered. "Dead if we run," Corporal David O'Connor countered, his sniper rifle steady atop a pile of rubble. "Might as well make them bleed for it." Walker nodded. They had no air support, no reinforcements. Command had been cut off days ago, and the planetary defense grid was a field of wreckage. The only thing keeping them alive was the fact that the Empire was methodical, slow in its advance, unwilling to waste resources on a battle already won. "Ramirez, sit rep on our stockpile," Walker ordered. The demolitions expert ran a quick check. 2 mags each, half a case of grenades. 1 law rocket, but I wouldn't bet on it working. He shook his head. "We're running on fumes, Cap." Briggs exhaled sharply. "And they've got shielded walkers, heavy drones, and God knows what else rolling in next. Our bullets barely dent their infantry." "They bleed," O'Connor said. "You just have to know where to shoot." Walker's jaw tightened. They'd fought like cornered wolves, but there was no denying the truth. The next assault would be the last. The Tovari would crush them, just as they had every other human holdout. They needed an advantage, something the enemy hadn't accounted for. A low rumble echoed through the ruins. The soldiers tensed. The Empire was preparing its next push. Walker checked his watch, his mind racing through options. He refused to let this end in some pointless last stand. There had to be a way to shift the fight. "Fall back to the old depot," he ordered. "Now." They moved quickly, staying low, weaving through the skeletal remains of buildings. New Anchorage had once been a thriving colony city, a hub of trade and industry. Now it was a graveyard. The depot was one of the few structures still standing, its reinforced walls scorched but intact. They slipped inside, sealing the entrance with debris. As the others secured firing positions, Ramirez pried open a rusted weapons locker, coughing as dust billowed out. He froze, his eyes widening. "No way," he breathed. Walker stepped forward. Inside the locker, coated in grime but unmistakable, sat a cache of old weapons, M240 machine guns, M72 law rockets, and crates of ammunition. Forgotten relics of another war, left behind when Earth's military modernized. O'Connor ran a hand over an M240, a slow grin spreading across his face. "The Empire mocks our weapons because they don't understand them." Briggs knelt beside the crate, inspecting the law rockets. "They think shields make them invincible. But these don't give a damn about shields." Walker felt something stir in his chest, a flicker of something dangerous. Hope. The Empire had built its strategy on technological superiority, assuming humans would fight on their terms. That assumption was about to cost them dearly. "Load up," he ordered. "We're about to teach them a lesson." The silence inside the depot was thick, the kind that came before a storm. Dust swirled in the dim light, filtering through shattered windows as Walker and his men worked quickly, hauling out the long-forgotten stockpile of weapons. Each piece of old Earth firepower felt like an artifact from another era, but in their hands, it became something more, a chance. Ramirez checked the seals on the law rockets, testing the mechanisms with careful hands. "These things are dinosaurs, but they still bite." Briggs crouched beside him, inspecting the M240 machine guns. "Bite hard enough to make a difference." "We're about to find out," Walker said, glancing toward O'Connor, who was already adjusting his sniper scope. "Run the numbers. How do we hit them?" The sniper didn't look up, his mind already calculating angles, distances, and enemy positions. The Tovari shields disperse energy, but don't like concussive force. If we angle the rockets right, the shockwave alone could knock them off balance. The M240S won't punch through their armor, but a sustained barrage might keep them pinned long enough for us to land the real hits. Briggs frowned. "That's a lot of maybes." Walker adjusted his grip on his rifle. "We don't need certainty. We just need an opening." They spread a rough map across a supply crate, marking out the ruins with whatever scraps of intel they had. The enemy was methodical, advancing in staggered formations with a mix of infantry and mechanized support. The walkers were the real problem, two-legged tanks with reinforced shielding, their heavy plasma cannons capable of leveling entire buildings in seconds. Standard rounds couldn't touch them. Ramirez tapped a point on the map. "We set up here. Funneled terrain, nowhere for them to maneuver. We drop the first few squads fast, make them think we're desperate, then let them push in. Once their walkers commit, we hit them hard." Cole swallowed. "And if they don't take the bait?" O'Connor chambered around. "Then we die quick instead of slow." Walker let the weight of it settle. They weren't planning a victory, just a chance to make the enemy bleed. But sometimes that was enough. He looked at each of them, their faces worn and sharp with determination. This wasn't about winning the war. It was about proving that humanity wasn't done yet. "Move out," he ordered. The ruins swallowed them as they made their way to the ambush point. Every step was careful, every movement precise. They knew the ground better than the enemy, and for now, that was their one advantage. The last time they had fought here, they were retreating. Now they were hunting. As they reached the staging ground, O'Connor took his position on an elevated ridge, his scope sweeping the battlefield. Briggs and Cole set up the machine guns behind a collapsed wall, feeding belts of ammunition with practiced hands. Ramirez and Walker crouched near the launchers, their eyes locked on the road leading into the kill zone. Then they waited. The first sign of the enemy was the steady thrum of marching feet. The Tovari moved with precision, their formations unbroken, as they advanced through the rubble. Plasma rifles gleamed in their hands, their helmets reflecting the dull glow of the burning city. Behind them, the walkers followed, their mechanical limbs crushing debris underfoot. O'Connor exhaled slowly. "On my mark." The first shot snapped through the air, a single round punching through an officer's visor. The body crumpled before the rest of the squad even registered what had happened. Then chaos erupted. The machine guns roared to life, a deafening wall of lead tearing into the advancing line. Shields flared as rounds impacted, forcing the Tovari to hunker down, their once perfect formations splintering under the relentless barrage. Walker caught movement from the corner of his eye, one of the soldiers attempting to flank. He swung his rifle up and fired, the shot finding its mark just as the law launcher kicked against his shoulder. The rocket streaked forward, a trail of smoke cutting through the battlefield before slamming into the lead Walker's knee joint. The explosion sent it reeling, the shockwave rippling outward, knocking nearby infantry off their feet. Ramirez grinned, already reloading. "Told you they still bite." The Tovari hesitated, their advance slowing. For the first time, they weren't pressing forward with unstoppable confidence. They were adapting, reassessing. The problem with enemies who believed they were invincible was that they never knew how to handle resistance. Walker signaled Briggs. Now, the second rocket launched, slamming into the exposed side of another walker. This time, the explosion was even greater. Ramirez had rigged the payload, increasing the pressure just enough to overload the shield's integrity. The walker staggered before collapsing, sending up a cloud of dust and debris. Then came the counterattack. Plasma fire ripped through the air, searing across their cover and forcing them lower. The Tovari weren't laughing anymore. They were angry. Briggs ducked as a blast sheared off the corner of the wall beside him. They are regrouping. Walker switched comm channels. O'Connor, talk to me. The sniper's voice was steady despite the gunfire. They're shifting formation, bringing in heavies from the west. They had done damage, but it wasn't enough. If the enemy established a perimeter, they'd be crushed in minutes. Walker scanned the battlefield, searching for something, anything, that could tip the balance. Then he saw it. A collapsed structure, barely holding together, perched above the main road. If they could bring it down, it would cut off the reinforcements, force the Tovari to fight on their terms. He pointed. Ramirez, bring it down. The demolitions expert didn't hesitate. Sprinting through gunfire, he reached the structure, planting the last of their explosives along the weakened support beams. Plasma fire seared past him, one shot grazing his shoulder, but he didn't stop. Walker counted the seconds. Ramirez hit the detonator. The explosion was instant, a thunderous crack as steel and stone collapsed, a wave of dust rushing out like a tidal force. The ground shook, the sound drowning out even the screams of the enemy as tons of debris buried them alive. Silence followed. Then, as the dust began to settle, the sound of retreating footsteps echoed through the ruins. The Tovari were pulling back. Briggs let out a breathless laugh. They're running. Walker didn't smile. He knew this was just the beginning. The Empire wouldn't forget this humiliation. They would come back stronger, angrier. But now, they knew something they hadn't before. Humans weren't just survivors. They were predators. The wind carried the scent of scorched metal and blood through the ruins, a grim reminder that victory had only bought them time. The dust was still settling from a collapsed structure, and the echoes of retreating Tovari boots had faded into the night, but Walker knew better than to believe the fight was over. The Empire wasn't in the business of leaving loose ends. They had embarrassed their enemy, broken their formation, and exposed their arrogance, but that only meant the next wave would come harder, faster, with more precision. The real battle hadn't started yet. Walker surveyed his men in the dim light. Sweat and dirt streaked their faces, exhaustion pressing into their bones, but there was something else in their eyes now, an edge, a readiness. They had seen the Tovari bleed. That changed everything. Briggs crouched next to him, checking his rifle before speaking. They won't make the same mistake twice. They don't have to, Walker replied. They just have to be faster than we are. O'Connor was already repositioning, sweeping his scope across the battlefield, scanning for movement. We've got maybe half an hour before they hit back. They won't pull their punches this time. Ramirez tightened a bandage around his shoulder, wincing but grinning through it. Then we don't give them a target to hit. Walker nodded. They needed to keep moving, stay unpredictable. The depot had given them an edge, but it was compromised now. If the Tovari brought air support or heavier artillery, they'd be wiped out in minutes. Their only chance was to use the city itself, turn the ruins into a weapon. Disperse in teams. Keep your lines open. We hit them where they're weakest, keep them off balance. No stand and fight. Make them chase shadows, Walker ordered. Cole shifted uncomfortably, gripping his rifle a little tighter. And if they box us in? Walker met his gaze, steady and unwavering. Then we make sure they regret it. They moved quickly, slipping through the wreckage of new anchorage like ghosts. The city had been a marvel once, all steel and glass, a beacon of human expansion. Now it was nothing but shattered remains, the bones of a dream crushed under the weight of an empire that saw humanity as little more than an inconvenience. That same arrogance had cost the Tovari today. Walker intended to make sure it cost them even more. O'Connor took position atop a half-collapsed office building, his rifle barrel resting against a broken beam as he scanned the main roads. The others spread out, moving through alleys and shattered structures, keeping low. The silence stretched, thick with anticipation. Then the first signs of the counterattack came. A low, mechanical hum reverberated through the air, distant but growing. Drones. Small, fast-moving, and deadly, the Empire's eyes in the sky. They swept over the ruins, scanning, searching, their sleek metal hulls reflecting the dim light of the fires still smoldering across the city. If they spotted movement, the Tovari would be on them in seconds. Walker pressed against the wall of a gutted storefront, his mind racing. They couldn't afford to be seen. At least not yet. He switched comms. "Ramirez, you carrying anything that flies?" A short chuckle came through the earpiece. "Got a few surprises left. Make it count." A moment later, the sharp whistle of a homemade explosive launcher cut through the air. A crude but effective rocket streaked upward, trailing sparks as it locked onto the lead drone. The explosion was quick, violent, sending metal fragments spiraling in all directions. The second drone hesitated, just long enough for O'Connor to put a round through its propulsion unit, sending it crashing into the side of a building. But the damage was done. The sky lit up with flashing signals, a call to arms the Tovari wouldn't ignore. Within seconds, the distant hum of approaching reinforcements became a thunderous roar. Briggs' voice cut in over the comms. "Multiple walkers inbound. Fast movers, too. They're not playing around." Walker exhaled slowly. "Good. Let's see if they're ready for round two." They shifted positions, staying ahead of the enemy's advance. The Tovari came in force this time, heavily armored squads moving in perfect synchronization, supported by towering walkers that stomped through the wreckage like unstoppable juggernauts. Plasma fire lit up the ruins, cutting through the darkness in streaks of blinding energy. But the humans didn't meet them head-on. Instead, they struck from the shadows, short bursts of gunfire disrupting formations before vanishing into the wreckage. The Tovari hesitated, unsure, unprepared for an enemy that refused to fight by their rules. O'Connor took down a squad leader, his rifle's suppressed crack barely audible over the battle's chaos. Briggs and Cole laid down covering fire, forcing the enemy into exposed positions. Ramirez rigged another explosive trap, detonating it just as a walker stepped forward, its shields flaring under the unexpected concussive force. The battlefield was shifting. The Tovari were stronger, faster, better equipped. But the humans were something else entirely. They were relentless. Then the air split with the deafening scream of incoming artillery. Walker barely had time to react before the first shell struck, the shock waves slamming into him like a freight train. Dust and debris rained down as buildings crumbled, fire consuming the air in hungry waves. The Tovari had brought in heavy bombardment. Briggs coughed through the smoke, voice sharp with urgency. "They're cutting us off." Walker pulled himself up, forcing his mind to focus. The Empire wasn't just responding. They were trying to end this in one decisive strike. They had underestimated humanity once, but now they were adapting. The humans had forced their hand, made them bleed, and the Tovari weren't interested in a prolonged fight anymore. They wanted annihilation. Walker's earpiece crackled. O'Connor's voice came through, strained but clear. "They've left their flank open. They're pushing everything forward. If we hit them from behind, we can break their formation." Walker knew what that meant. A full assault. No more hit and run. No more shadows. If they went for this, it would be all or nothing. Ramirez's voice cut in, calm despite the chaos. "We've come this far. Might as well see it through." Walker tightened his grip on his rifle. There was no other choice. He switched channels, broadcasting to the entire team. "All units regroup. We hit them where it hurts." The humans moved as one, weaving through the wreckage with deadly intent. The Tovari had numbers, technology, superior firepower. But they didn't have desperation. They didn't have men who refused to die quietly. And that would be their downfall. The night sky burned as the battle reached its climax, fire and smoke twisting through the ruins like a living thing. The Tovari had overcommit, pushing forward in their arrogance, believing they could crush the humans with sheer force. But now they were trapped, their vanguard exposed, their rear vulnerable. The humans had led them into a killing ground. All that remained was to finish what they had started. Walker moved swiftly through the rubble, his mind calculating every angle, every advantage. Their window was closing. The Tovari still had numbers, and if they regrouped, the humans would be the ones at a disadvantage. They had to strike now, with everything they had left. O'Connor's voice came through the comms, sharp and focused. They're dug in at the main thoroughfare. Heavy armor, entrenched positions. They know they screwed up, and they're trying to hold ground until reinforcements arrive. Briggs cut in, breathless from the sprint. If they get air support, we're done. We need to hit them before they can call it in. Walker scanned the battlefield, his eyes locking onto the towering silhouette of a command vehicle, sleek, reinforced, its armored panels glowing with the faint blue hum of a defensive barrier. That was the heart of the enemy's position. If they took it out, they wouldn't just break their line. They would cut off their communications, leaving the entire force blind. His grip tightened around his weapon. We take down that command center, we shatter them. O'Connor, find me a clean shot. The sniper was already moving. I'll get an angle, but that shield is a problem. We're going to need more than bullets to crack that thing. Walker glanced at Ramirez, who was already rummaging through his pack, a knowing smirk on his face. I've got just the thing. They moved with precision, using the ruins for cover as they closed the distance. The Tovari weren't idle. Plasma bolts screamed through the night, carving through stone and metal, forcing them to keep moving. The air was thick with the acrid scent of burning debris, every breath tasting of smoke and blood. Cole ducked behind a collapsed column, his voice tense. We're running out of time. Walker knew it. The longer they waited, the harder this would get. He keyed his comms. Ramirez, get in position. Briggs, lay down suppressive fire. O'Connor, take out anything with rank insignia. We don't need them giving orders. The humans moved as one. Gunfire erupted from the shadows, precise and unrelenting. The Tovari reeled under the assault, momentarily thrown into disarray. That was all the opening they needed. Ramirez sprinted forward, dropping to one knee as he leveled the launcher against his shoulder. The rocket locked onto the command vehicle, its guidance system humming as it calculated the trajectory. Then he fired. The missile streaked through the air, a burning spear of destruction. The Tovari barely had time to react before it struck the shield in a brilliant cascade of energy. For a moment, the barrier held, its surface rippling as it absorbed the impact. But then, with a deafening crack, it failed. The explosion tore through the command center, shattering metal and sending flames roaring into the sky. The shock wave rippled outward, throwing Tovari soldiers to the ground, their formations collapsing in an instant. Briggs hooped through the comms. That's what I'm talking about. Walker didn't waste time celebrating. Push forward. Finish this. The humans surged ahead, cutting through the disoriented Tovari with brutal efficiency. Without leadership, without coordination, the enemy faltered. Some tried to regroup, others broke and ran. Either way, they were done. O'Connor's rifle cracked again, a final shot ringing through the chaos. The last ranking officer crumpled, his body hitting the ground before his soldiers even realized he was gone. The battle was over. The Tovari weren't just defeated. They were shattered. Walker stood amidst the wreckage, his breath slow and steady. The fires still burned, the ruins still stood, but for the first time, the silence wasn't one of fear. It was victory. Ramirez sat on a broken slab of concrete, wiping soot from his face with the back of his hand. Think they'll come back? Walker exhaled, staring out over the ruins of New Anchorage. Maybe, but next time, they'll remember what happened here. Briggs chuckled, slinging his rifle over his shoulder. Yeah, they'll remember the day they thought we were weak. The humans gathered, battered but unbroken. The battle had taken its toll, but it had also proven something undeniable. The Empire had come believing that humanity was nothing more than a primitive nuisance. But they had learned the truth the hard way. Humanity wasn't just surviving. They were fighting back.